Welcome to the Exploring Awareness podcast. Join Dr. Frank Anderson and Lisa Berry in exploring new ways to live in this chaotic world and find peace and joy in the most unlikely places.
Hi, and thanks so much for listening to our Exploring Awareness podcast. I'm Lisa here with Frank, and we're just grateful that you are choosing to listen, and we're excited about our topic for this conversation, which I got to pick this time because I'm super into it, and that is synchronicity. Are you good with that, Frank?
Oh, Lisa, how synchronistic of you. I was just thinking of that.
Were you really?
No.
I didn't think so. See, being authentic, that's part of synchronicity.
But I love synchronicity, and I'm so glad you want to talk about it. It's one of the fun things about what we're doing, that when you explore awareness, fun things can happen.
That's right. And same thing with synchronicity, which for those who may not be familiar with it, I think it was psychologist Carl Jung who did he coin the phrase or came up with the term originally, and referring to the meaningful or even miraculous, I love that, coincidences that occur in your life. When you experience synchronicity, you'll have experiences that seem far too significant to be mere day-to-day encounters. Do you think that's a good definition?
Far more significant. Well, and then, I found a quote from him too. Synchronicity is an ever-present reality for those who have eyes to see.
Hopefully we all have eyes, but you're using them, I guess, is the point.
It reminds me of the title of our podcast, Exploring Awareness. Right? Because what are the eyes to see? And in your definition, right, he's saying they're happening all the time, right?
Well, I don't know if they're happening all the time, but I think I don't know. That's a good question. Are they? Because lately I have definitely been in the flow, the synchronicity flow, and it's exciting. And I like that he called it even miraculous, because I don't know, are they always there and I'm just aware of them now, or are things happening because I'm in the flow and I'm expecting them and moving in a certain direction?
Well, what is a recent synchronicity that you've had?
I'm on this path and working out some stuff, and something will come up, and then I'll go, I'm going to read something, and then I'll read something and it addresses exactly what I was just thinking about. Or I'll say a word or mention a person, and then someone else will say the same word or mention the same person. I don't know. I feel like I'm not giving a good example, but it's been happening over and over and over again in conversations and situations. And to me, it's like a flow. And
yeah, I agree. And you might have called that a coincidence in the past.
Right.
You may have said, oh, that's just a coincidence. But now you see it as something with meaning, right?
Right.
And that might be the difference between a synchronicity and a coincidence.
And because these things are happening, it's kind of affirming too, that the direction you're heading is the right direction, because it's like sign after sign after sign. And to the point where I had to stop and think, am I imagining this? Am I just looking for something to hold on to? Am I just thinking this is happening so I can assure myself that I'm headed in the right direction? But then there was just so many, and it kept happening. I thought, nope, this is really happening. So I'm excited to be in the flow.
To me, there's something about your approach or one's approach to things that happen in life that, can be looked at from different perspectives. And certainly, a rational mind, concrete mind, an analytical mind could be dismissive of that, right? And say, well, that's a coincidence. Right. It's because you're on those web pages. It's because, there are other factors that are kind of decreasing the random chance that these things would happen. And, that may or may not be true. And from another approach, it doesn't need to matter, right? Because it's like you said, it's like, so what? So what? What does it mean for you, right? To have your eyes open and to be so present in the present moment and in your flow that you can see these things happen and derive some joy from it, derive some pleasure, derive some validation. It isn't validation of the rational mind. It's the validation of your sense of presence. You're there and you're embracing life as it flows in front of you. And life is flowing and you're paying attention. And that's how I kind of like the quote about having the eyes to see, because if you don't have the eyes to see, you'll miss them. You'll miss them. But what we've been doing with this exploring awareness, paying attention to the present moment, it changes the present moment, because there's when you approach the present moment with that sense of awareness, then you start to see things unfold. And if you weren't present, there's no chance for that to happen.
I'm just soaking that all in, because I so appreciate you giving that perspective, sense of presence, present moment awareness. We talk about that all the time. And then I also found another definition: synchronicity in action means that you are aware of your thoughts and the connection to your result. So it's really about awareness. It's present moment awareness and a sense of presence. And you're right. That is such a great way to explain it. And if you're I know a lot of people listen in different orders, and maybe you're not aware that Frank is a physician, and most physicians are scientists, and you're a scientist, yet you can give some validity to synchronicity, even as a scientist.
Well, I can have one foot in each camp.
Don't ruin it for me. You just made it so beautiful.
Well,
for a backup affirmation. All right, go ahead. No, I want to hear it. Tell me.
I don't need to explain these things rationally, because I enjoy letting life unfold as it unfolds. And I kind of feel like that's an expansive approach. And, to reduce it to something without meaning is fine, but that's no fun. That sounds like a curmudgeonese.
Yeah.
Right? And of course, if you're doing scientific research and you're working with patients and you're using data and being objective, of course, that's the way you got to go. I mean, that's the way I practice medicine. I don't practice medicine with synchronicity. I practice medicine based on evidence.
Yes.
And when I'm doing that, I'm doing that. But, I've told you I've been to Burning Man, and we have some episodes about that. And that place is flow, and the synchronicities out there are just incredible. And you could ask anyone who goes out, and they will say the number of these type of things that happen are just so higher than they are out in the world. I think because everyone is kind of out there just being themselves, and the funnest, most unusual synchronicities can happen. I mean, I've heard people say they're walking and it's hot and they're like, oh, I wish I had a snow cone. And then they walk up and there's someone with a snow cone. Like, here's a snow cone stand, out in the middle of the desert. People are making snow cones. One day I had a vest that the sleeve had torn, and I needed to sew it. I didn't have anything to sew it with. And I was walking out the back of our camp, and across the street, there were 8 sewing machines and 8 seamstresses set up a sewing station that day only. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. How in the world does that happen? And so thinking about it doesn't make any sense. Let's just enjoy that that the presence, the happening, the coincidence, and it's just a synchronicity, presence and awareness changes a coincidence into a synchronicity. And you're like, yes, yes, yes.
I feel like I'm trying to give some credibility to it. I mean, a psychologist, world-renowned psychologist, Carl Jung, coined a term, so he must have thought there was something to it, psychologically speaking.
Yeah, well, he's saying it's an ever-present reality. And I would agree with him. I think, like I said at the beginning, they're happening all the time, and we don't see them. But we can develop the eyes to see them. And then when we develop the eyes, then we can start to see them and enjoy them. I think that's what he was saying.
And do you think people at Burning Man are more open to it? And that's why it happened? Do you have to be open to it to make it happen, or to be not make it happen, but to be looking for it, I guess?
Well, I think that it's fun that it happens at Burning Man, but I think that it can happen. It's happening to you. And we're talking about the eyes to see. And another word that I like, that I do actually use in my practice, is intuition. And I think, again, when we're talking about exploring awareness, mindfulness, presence, intuition is another thing that kind of starts to be more active. This ability to kind of sense what's going on, and I think that ability to sense what's going on allows us to also see the synchronicities that are happening in our lives. Do you see the connection there?
Well, I think I used to think I was a pretty intuitive person. And then sometimes you have shocked me on how intuitive you are. Do you think that's part of your personality, or is that something you fostered as a physician, or where does that come from in you?
Well, you can't make yourself intuitive.
Right. Well, I'll just say me first. I'm a Pisces. I'm an extremely sensitive person. I'm an empathetic person. If you're in pain, I feel your pain. So intuition has always been a part of my life. I think you have to be kind of more open to it or not open to it. But that's me. I'm free-flowing, fun-seeking Lisa. And you're the scientist doctor, and yet
I'm an Aquarius, and that Aquarians are all in their head, right?
Yeah. Is that intuition in your head, or what kind of?
No, Aquarius. I don't know if that's an intuition as much as it is just thinking and creating. But no, I feel like the intuition comes from presence. Like when I see a patient, since I'm just being present, I'm not distracted so much. So I can start to see, how people move, how people talk, what people are saying. And it gives me a lot more information than just what conversation might give. And we all do that a little bit, picking up facial cues and voice things. But, I think it can go deeper than that. And I think that being present and mindful allows you to start picking up on things that you wouldn't have picked up before.
Well, I mean, that's true, but that's just paying attention. I think if you're feeling things or noticing things about people, and how lucky are your patients to have a doctor who's intuitive or sensitive or paying attention.
Right. And I do think that's available to anybody. The ability to enjoy synchronicities, the ability to have more intuition, it kind of goes along with that being connected to your core, right? And not having it covered up by all of those other things that we talk about. Again, for people just starting with this episode, we often talk about this core of being, and we use words like joy and peace and generosity and love. But, that can also look like wisdom and intuition and, the ability to notice things. And so I think that intuition and kind of openness to synchronicities kind of fits into that core. What do you think?
I always like to put myself in the shoes of the listener. So I'm thinking of seeing people going, how can you learn to be intuitive? I have people in my life who are the exact opposite of intuitive. So are you saying by connecting to these things in your core that's how you become intuitive?
Yeah, right. And well, remember, connecting to your core is not something that you kind of make yourself do. Connecting to your core is something you experience through this, what we're talking about on this podcast, exploring awareness, using mindfulness techniques to connect to that core. So again, the intuition and the synchronicity appreciation is a bottom up kind of thing, as opposed to something that you make yourself do.
What if you've never felt that? What if you've lived your life for 20, 30, 60, 70 years, and you've just kind of gone along for the ride and hadn't put a lot of time and thought and energy into this, and we talk about it, and it's my goal for sure you say the first thing I learned from you is you said the joy is always there. We just cover it up. And I was like, what? The joy is always there. It sounds simple, but it takes some effort to uncover it, which is kind of sad that it takes effort to get to your joy. But then I started thinking, what if people have never experienced that before? How is it there for everyone to feel and to get to?
Absolutely. But it makes me think about, what covers it up.
Yeah. Life, families, experiences, jobs, coworkers, traffic. I mean, it gets covered up for some people at a very young age based on their parents and their income level.
Well, and there may be some people. I would also argue that there have been times in, I hope, everyone's life where you get glimpses here and there of that sense of joy of being. And you don't necessarily know what it is. But it's there. It's there in all of us. It's part of being human. It's part of being part of this universe. And so I know that it's going to be more difficult for some people than others to trust, to have faith, to do the work, to get these realizations. But I'm absolutely certain that everyone has that possibility.
So why did I have that thought? Because we have been talking for a year now.
Because you're empathetic.
Well, and I think maybe there's somebody listening. And if we could just explore this a little more, maybe we could help them get there. Something is telling me that somebody needs to hear this, that we talk about it. The joy is always there. That is such a great thought. And then, but somebody was thinking, but Lisa and Frank, you don't understand my life. You don't know what I've been through. And I want to feel the joy. And you say we just cover it up, but I don't know how to do that. What would you tell them? I know I'm asking a lot. You're not a psychologist. I know I'm asking a lot, but something is telling me somebody needs to hear this.
Yeah.
It's me.
Yeah. And I think that when people know that, they're aware of it. They're aware, but they don't know that they are aware. And so, there's already kind of an opening. If you weren't saying that, if you were just living it, then there'd be even harder. Yeah, I'm not a therapist, and this isn't therapy. This is, kind of well-being. This is spirituality. And there are definitely things that are in people's lives that require therapy and require counseling and require talking to someone. But I also know that's not available to everyone. I can talk about this, until I'm blue in the face. But for anyone who says that can't happen, I would ask them to try if they would like to try something different, and if they have some sense that it's possible, then I would start having them meditate, like the way we do on this podcast, and try it for themselves. Now, I think you were saying, people who just can't meditate.
Yeah, people said, no, I tried. I tried 3 years ago and it didn't work. So I don't meditate. I'm not a proponent.
And, I think people make their choices as well. Mm. And I would encourage them to do this, but I don't ever like to feel evangelical about this or telling people they have to do this. I mean, there has to be an initial interest in it. And so if someone came to me and said, I've never experienced joy in my life and I've never experienced peace, never experienced love, and I want to, then I would start this process with them. And I'm pretty sure they would uncover some pretty difficult situations that may have their kind of conditioning locked into place. But they might need to work with someone to untangle some of those things, because being aware of your beliefs and about yourself, being aware of your situation is one thing, but sometimes, you do have to untangle that with a professional to help you live in the world. Because, these spiritual things are great, but we also have to live in the world.
So a year ago when you said that, I was so delighted and I thought it's true. And I would say it to people and I don't know how well it was received. And maybe now a year later, I still think it's true, but maybe it's not as simple as I thought it first was. But I mean, it sounds like it is, but maybe it isn't.
What? The joy is always there?
Yeah. Like we just cover it up. So, hey, uncover it. And then there's your joy.
Oh, next. Right. Yeah, no, it's not that simple necessarily.
But it could be.
Well, I remember we've talked about Eckhart Tolle when he was miserable, suicidal, so sad, so depressed. He said, I can't live with myself anymore. This is in the power of now. Then he had this instant realization that the part of him that can't live with himself anymore isn't the part that's depressed. He had this realization that who he was not what he was saying. He had this instant realization of that he was something else. That being trapped in that story and that narrative was not who he was. He's not his narrative. You could say he had a realization that he was the awareness of himself. Mm. But he calls it the power of now. So again, words aren't perfect for this kind of realization, but he was at rock bottom and went from rock bottom to 2 years of bliss. And I'm sure 5 minutes before that, he was so miserable, he wanted to kill himself. Mm. And so these things aren't necessarily logical. They're not thought out. But giving yourself an option, an opening that maybe, just like so many, 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 many people have had these kind of realizations, had these kind of experiences, and we tend to think of them outside of our circles, like, who are these people? That's them. But still, me, I'm really miserable. But, I mean, let's not put them on a pedestal. We're all humans, and we all have the same potential. And so even if there was that just glimmer of hope, a glimmer of faith, that's enough to work with.
And I would add that it is possible. It is possible. It's possible. And it's there for everyone, not just certain people. No matter how much money you have, or no matter what health your condition you're in, no matter what you've experienced your whole life, it's still possible.
Yes, it's absolutely possible. It has to be. And, some people at their very dying moments have these realizations. It's like, you know what? All that stuff, it ain't working for me. I'm about to die. And they get a relief. But don't wait till you're about to die.
See, and that is my strongest calling. And I've been trying to figure out how to put that into words. I mean, we talk about it and I write about it and I think about it, but how can I put it into words? I just want to scream it from a tower that this life is a miracle. And you only have this one time through, and don't waste it. I read a thing earlier today. It's like, every time you speak to someone, think about, what if they died tonight? Did you cherish that conversation enough? Did you say what you wanted to say? And I thought, that is a lot. That is a lot to put on a person
Yes.
I mean, I try to be that way, but who can walk through life every single minute with that on their mind? So I'm trying to think of a way to say it. So
it doesn't need to be on your mind, though. It could just be how you are.
Right.
Right. So again, a top down versus bottom up. So when you're in the present moment, life becomes 3, 4, 5 times as rich. And so you're living in the present moment without thinking about how the past has affected you or the worries of the future. And so if you have those conversations at a party that are just present moment there, that's it. That's the spice of life right there.
And that's what people say, oh, I love this person, because they make you feel, when they talk to you, they make you feel like you're the only one in the room, and they're really focused on you and paying attention to you.
And so you don't have to cherish it. You are cherishing it because you're doing it right in the present moment, mindfully present being. That's your gift of your being to the person. And that's it. And that's the moment. And then when it's over, it's over. No regrets. There will be no regrets in those cases, right?
Yeah, right. I have this habit of rehearsing things. I don't mull over the past and I don't worry about the future, but I find myself just thinking of different scenarios and how it might work out or what I should say. And I don't know if that fits into that category or not. It's not present moment awareness.
It sounds a little future planning.
Yeah. And when I catch myself doing it, I think, Lisa, stop. You'd be better off just meditating and thinking nothing. Or would I?
Well, it depends on who you're going to interview.
Well, it's not even interviews. It's just
but your job is to interview people, and you got to plan that out. So you can't just wing that.
Yeah. Right.
And so, there's that. And that maybe bleeds over into other things, and that's fine too. And you're aware of it. And, if you're rehearsing a conversation when you don't need to, just go in, just notice that you're doing it and move on.
Do you ever rehearse conversations?
No. Sometimes I make stories up about, what's going to happen, but I also have been good about catching myself about those stories and not buying into things I don't know, right?
That is one of the most powerful things we've learned here too, is that these stories and these scenarios, and you can convince yourself of something that's happening and think that person's doing this against you, and you can concoct such a scenario that could be so far from the truth. So save yourself the pain and the energy of doing that.
Yeah. But the thing about it is we do it.
Right.
We know that we do it, and then we can judge ourselves for doing it and make it twice as bad. Mm-hmm. Or we can acknowledge that that's what our brain does. That's what we're wired to do. And you can say, there it goes again. I'm going to, make a cup of coffee.
One of the best gifts you've ever given me is right when I think we first started talking, and I don't know if I can articulate this correctly, but you said something to the effect like, I can't figure this out. Like, don't try to figure you out, and don't figure out this process, and just let it be. And it's given me so much freedom and so much joy. Maybe it was because you told me that to begin with. So I know that's where you're coming from. So it makes it so much more joyful for me that I don't have to worry about it. That I don't, oh, what did I say? Or what does that mean? I don't have to worry about it. So that was a gift to an overthinker like me. And I occasionally have to remind myself that don't create a story. That doesn't mean that, or just that. No, just be. So that was a gift to me for someone like me. And if we could, I feel like, have more relationships like that, where you're just upfront and honest, and here I am, and here's what we're talking about, and all we have is this moment. So don't look back, or don't plan ahead, or don't concoct a story about what's going on.
Right. And what did you lose by stop doing that?
A lot of stress and a lot of anxiety.
There you go. Right.
A lot of disappointment.
And what did you gain?
A fun, free, open, honest, learning relationship.
There.
And a podcast.
Beautifully said, right? And that type of experience can be applied every day to everything. That type of just freedom. And that's where the synchronicities start to happen, right?
Right. Exactly.
I mean, This podcast has been full of synchronicities.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, every conversation we have practically is a synchronicity. And every time we pick a topic, I do a little search, and boom, there's these amazing quotes that just pop up right for me to use. It's incredible.
Right. And I don't like to overthink it, because I don't want to. I don't want to jinx it, because it's. And
that's what overthinking.
Right.
Overthinking kind of messes things up. But you know that you have a tendency to overthink, and so you see it and you move on. Right. And I won't say you let it go, because I like to say it falls off. Once you go back to the present, it's gone, isn't it? That tendency is gone. It's not like you let it go. You came to the present moment and it's gone. It just fell away.
And I don't know, I've been having some fun meditations lately.
Oh, yeah? Like what?
I don't want to tell you. just
well, you can't bring it up and then.
I don't know. Have you ever felt like you were flying in a meditation before?
Yes.
What's that about?
I do space travel.
Get out.
I go up in the sky, and there's stars and planets and stuff. And so, it's kind of like daydreaming, right? And that's part of a little distraction of meditation. I know when I learned to meditate in Thailand, they actually, one of the stages was for you to create a mental image. And people were having a lot of trouble. This is a silent retreat, but I don't know how I knew this. I guess afterwards we talked about it. People were say no mental image came up. And there, some people were upset, and other people had these crazy mental images. I had a blue sky with clouds, but it was a Picasso painting of blue skies with clouds. It's kind of fragmented. And as part of that process, there was also kind of, if you could do that with your brain, there was a lot of like satisfaction and happiness, and like, oh my God, I did that. And it was part of the training of mindfulness, because, you can get stuck in that. You can get stuck in your ability to do those kind of things, fly and go to space. And sometimes I can make red and green and blue colors come up and things like that. But all of those are, they're fun and they're things you do and that your brain does. But again, it's one of those things that then awareness, and you become deeper in your awareness when you can see what your brain can do, when you can see your happiness. They call it kind of a rough happiness, a coarser happiness. And the joy that comes from seeing that as more of a sublime, kind of deeper. It doesn't go away when the fun mental images go away, when the flying goes away. So it is one of the stages that people will go through during meditation, this type of experience. And it's wonderful and it's interesting. And with some of all that clutter in the brain, once that goes away, then these kind of things can happen. But again, they're activities of the brain that you can then bring that awareness to and just be deeper and gain more wisdom into how your brain is working.
And now when I think about it, it almost seems synchronistic. I'm on this path and I'm learning these lessons and I'm being more aware. Once you get into the groove of being aware, it can really help bring some peace, I think. So then you get into the groove of being aware and then you meditate. And part of this whole process is like things start to happen. And I feel like they're happening the way they're meant to happen. And they wouldn't have happened if the other thing hadn't happened. You see what I'm trying to say about the synchronicity of it all?
Yeah, exactly. That's right. That's a flow. That's
right.
Kind of flow. And maybe there was some intuition too, that this was kind of the right way to go, and just that flow and intuition and synchronicity. Yeah, it's so freeing and such a wonderful way to live compared to confinement and, staying closed up in a protective little box.
And it's possible for everyone.
Absolutely.
And it doesn't cost a thing.
It doesn't cost anything. And we don't even have commercials on our podcast. We don't have any sponsors.
No.
No monetization. So it's like free.
Yeah.
Gift.
That's the best part. It's like, think about it. There's so many ways you want to better yourself and better your life. And, for $39.95 a month, you can do it. It doesn't cost a thing to just uncover your joy and love yourself and try to meditate and get rid of the stories and find people who want to have open, unjudgmental relationships and, just be open to the possibilities and be non-judgmental and let go of the stories and just find your joy. It's there. I promise you, it's there.
So that always brings up the question, how?
Right.
We can read this and we can listen and talk, but the how really is a deeply personal thing. And that kind of moves us into a guided meditation, I would say. Wouldn't you?
Yes, absolutely.
Because once the talking is over, a lot of people turn the podcast off.
Or a lot of people turn it up.
Or they turn it up. But if you're driving, it's hard to do the meditation. So I understand that. Just don't forget when you get home, I want to see those consumption numbers go up at the end. All you listeners out there. But either way, I think that even the conversation can guide people to connect to something deeper. But really, it is about your own personal connection to something deeper. And the magic of this is by not relying on thoughts and past and future, which is what we're used to, that's where all of this opens up from. And the synchronicities and the intuition, the freedom. And it can seem like a paradox. And it can seem like you're losing something, but you don't. You don't lose anything and you gain a lot. So this is where people say I can't meditate because they're afraid they're going to lose something, or that, how could they not think 24/7? And I'm not asking you not to think anyway. I'm asking you to go a little deeper. And the how to do that starts. You can't just go to it right away. You have to kind of work your way to it. And the way we do that here is starting to take a seat, be in a comfortable position. Just bring yourself to your chair and perhaps silently state an intention. It may be, to connect to the core or to find a sense of joy or peace within. And you'll start then by just being aware of the breathing. And we start here because the breath is this just obvious, intimate thing that's happening in the present moment. And there may be sounds happening in the present moment. And there may be bodily feelings happening in the present moment, but let's just practice and focus on the breath. The breath that's been going on all day. And we have just stopped now to be aware of it. And just feel the air as it moves in through your nose or your mouth. Filling your lungs. Up to a certain point, and then the process reverses. It's so simple. But that's the present moment. That's what's happening. And instead of this breathing being something that you just do, which you've been doing your whole life, this practice allows us to be aware of it. It's making the unconscious conscious. And so instead of just breathing, you know that you're breathing. And what part of you knows that you're breathing? And just feel into that part. It takes a lot of practice because when people can't meditate, it's often because there's so many thoughts. And just like you've been breathing, you can be aware of your breath. Could you be aware of your thoughts? And so try this. Try to remember what you had, for your last meal. And think of the different parts of it, where you were. Try to recreate that in your mind. What the food tasted like. If you're with someone, right? And now shift from those thoughts to the awareness of those thoughts. And then what happens to the thought? And think of a story. Something that you think might happen, or someone else thinks might happen. Something on the news, predictions, something in your family, something at work, something that's bothering you, something that you're unsure about. Think about that story, feel into it, and then just bring awareness to that whole story. What happens to that? And so practicing awareness of these stories and thoughts, you might start to notice they just dissolve. They fall away, leaving something still there. There's part of you that's present, that's aware, that's awareness. And so all of this stuff is dissolving away with the same awareness we use for the breath. And there's still something there that had nothing to do with the thoughts, with the stories. What is that? And what does that mean? If any of these things just dissolve away, and what's left is a sense of freedom. And maybe along with that, a sense of joy and peace. And love and possibility. And so with these meditation practice, you get to know that place. And maybe all of those things you thought weren't really true, and maybe this is what's really true. And so then when you move out into the world, instead of a very narrow experience of the day, there all of a sudden becomes an opening of possibilities. Of synchronicities. And as the old stories fall away and the new experience of life emerges, you can keep moving into that lane. And without thinking or forcing, it just arises spontaneously and naturally. And so the ship, in a way, changes course a little bit. And as you keep moving along this path, do you notice the course changes, things start to look different. You move around in the world differently. It's not a quick fix. But your relationships change, perhaps expand. You notice synchronicities, develop intuition, see things you didn't see before, appreciate, love, generousness, generousness. And then you look back, 6 months later, a year later, and you see, things seem different. Things seemed lighter. I feel more myself. I'm living a life that's mine. And those things I thought were so important actually weren't. And the things that are important are still here. And of course, thoughts will come and distractions and daydreams, and just go back to the breath. Aware of the breath, aware of the thoughts. Rest is awareness. Connect to the deeper part until you get distracted again. Compassion for your easily distractible mind. And don't put a time limit. This is kind of a lifelong path now for you. And so we'll end now with a couple of breaths. And then open your eyes and stretch and hear what Lisa has to say.
It's interesting hearing what you have to say and thinking and letting go and meditating all at the same time. But I find it peaceful. You're saying what I think are really important things, but I'm meditating. And so they just kind of, I think, connect with a certain part of your brain that I still feel relaxed, but I'm still hearing the message.
Right. Because there's the hearing and then there's the work you're doing yourself just to
exactly.
be aware.
Exactly. Right.
And it's different than a conversation because it's the guiding to a place where you feel. And you can do it without guiding too. I always find it helpful to be guided, but that's why I'm a fan of retreats though, because if you do it for long enough, you do it.
Right.
But sometimes it takes a while to when you're by yourself to get into that because there's so much, you go to a retreat and you say, why am I here? And oh my gosh. And brains do all kinds of things, but the monkey mind, tame the monkey mind, but really it's like connect to that part of you that's not monkey mind. And I just wish everyone good luck and perseverance in carrying this on.
Through awareness and meditation.
Yes.
And it's possible and it's available to everybody.
And you will enjoy the synchronicities and all the fun things.
Absolutely.
It can be tough, but it can be just fun, freeing, just like
Yes.
there's so many possibilities that can open up for you and for the world. And that's what I'm really hopeful for as we move forward.
And if you've heard anything in here that you connected with or want to share with us, we always love to hear from you. exploringawareness@gmail.com is our email address. Again, that's the name of the podcast, exploringawareness@gmail.com. All over the world, we know you're listening, and we're very grateful for that. And we'd love to hear from you. And you can check us out on Facebook and Instagram and on Twitter as well.
I hope everyone has lots of synchronicities this week, and I'd like to hear about them if they happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks, Frank, for everything that you bring to this podcast as well.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. Have a great week.
This podcast is not an attempt to practice medicine or provide specific medical advice, nor does use of this information establish a physician-patient relationship. Listening to this podcast does not replace medical consultation with a qualified health or medical professional to meet the health and medical needs of you or others. If you are having problems, please see your primary care provider or your local mental health professional.